is scandal after scandal, because ultimately there isn't a political project. No one's really saying anything or meaning anything. There's just people who are still clinging to power. And I think what that has done is created a deep mistrust in politics and the political system. If you're unemployed, or you're disabled, or you're running a small business, or even if you're running a medium-sized business, we all have so much more in common than multimillionaires and billionaires who politicians for far too long have allowed not to pay their fair share in tax. It's almost becoming a redundant question, because actually NATO is destroying itself.
Well, it's becoming a question you won't answer, Zack. Should we stay in NATO?
Well, right now, no one's talking about leaving NATO because...
Including you.
Right.
Zack, welcome back to Newsnight.
Thanks so much for having me back.
I remember a Newsnight hustings, and it all began for you, I like to think, on this sofa in that seat.
I'm starting to think this is my lucky seat. I'm going to insist on sitting here at all times.
Well, we are talking about luck for the Greens, but before we get there, can we talk about you? I mean, you were a Lib Dem, Zack.
Yes, about 11 years ago, so quite a while now. In fact, the years are getting further and further and further away. But one thing I've always really cared about, and still do to this day, is proportional representation. Now, in my 20s, even if you'd said to me who was the leader of the opposition, I probably wouldn't have known. Now, I used to be ashamed of that and the fact that I didn't vote until a little bit later in life. But actually, I've decided to own it, because I think there's lots of people in this country who look at politics and think it doesn't represent them, or they're not interested, or it's just a bit confusing. And one of the reasons I think that is because of the first past the post voting system. It very often blocks people out of the conversation. Now, in 2015, when Natalie Bennett was leader of the Green Party, I felt like she wasn't talking about proportional representation much, and now she's a friend. I've often said, you know, if you talked about it more, I would have joined the Green Party sooner. And she pointed out totally legitimately that we used to get about 10 seconds of airtime. And with that very limited airtime, do you talk about the cost of living, or the climate crisis, or the things that are really hitting people? Or do you talk about what used to be quite an abstract concept about changing the voting system? Now, I don't think it's so abstract anymore. In fact, sometimes when I knock on doors, people bring it up with me themselves. I'm always very keen to say at this point too, that the Green Party have demonstrated we can and do win under first past the post.
Yeah.
But I still want to change the voting system so it represents everyone.
So I've given you an open start, and you haven't talked to me about microplastics, about intensive farming. You haven't spoken to me about the capitalist culture. You haven't talked to me about onshore wind. You've gone for the voting system, Zack. And I'm asking you, where's the green in you? I mean, do you remember your speech at the party conference? You mentioned tax 11 times. Do you remember how many times you mentioned climate?
Probably twice.
5.
Okay.
So where's the green in you?
Well, this is the crucial decade of climate action. In fact, the UN Secretary General said this is the vital time to do this work. I'm also very clear, if we talk about the climate crisis, but we don't address people's everyday issues, what we do is lose people. It feels like the party that isn't representing them. I'm very clear that if you need to get food on your table or heat in your homes, then we need to be talking about those issues. Now, in the same breath, I can say, and I often do, to be fair to me, I say this all the time, that if you're from a working class community, or if you're at the worst end of the inequality crisis, you have done the least to cause the climate crisis, and you'll be hit the hardest. So let me give you an example. We know this is not some distant idea. Wildfires and floods are right here, right now. And if you're a renter and you don't own your own building and you live in a basement flat, you are much more likely to be flooded and not have insurance on your property. So not only were you poorer in the first place, you're going to face the worst impacts of the climate crisis. We see this with heat as well. Workers who are working in environments that aren't appropriate. If you don't have as much power or money, you're much less likely to be able to complain about it or see action happen, and your life could literally be in danger. So the climate crisis is not distant from the inequality crisis or the cost of living crisis. They're the exact same thing. So what I often do is talk about how I want to lower people's bills, tax people fairly, particularly multimillionaires and billionaires, and tackle the climate crisis. Okay. We can't separate those things. They're the same conversation.
But I mean, I'm just thinking I'm on the doorstep. I mean, can you give me a doorsteppable cost of living green policy?
Yes, I want to lower your bills. So I want to make sure that we're stopping shareholder profits by water nationalisation. So that means bringing water companies into public hands.
Buying them?
Yes. So right now,
there's no magic money tree. Liz Truss proved that. So where does the money come from to buy Thames Water?
Well, we first of all need to listen to the shareholders, actually, because they say that the assets are not worth anything. And if we removed shareholder dividends, right now they're receiving billions and billions of pounds of profit, and took the assets back in public hands for no money, that's the first way to step into taking water back into public hands.
Okay, so you're going to lower my water bill.
And also it's important to say, though, that it sometimes gets presented as a radical idea. We know that the water companies were in public hands. They were then privatised. I would say that was the radical idea, when now 30% of our water bill goes to profit at the same time that they're pumping sewage into our waters and charging us extra for the privilege. I wouldn't stop there, though. I want to bring in rent controls. We want to look at things like universal free childcare, and we want to make sure that work pays. We have a lot of conversations about apparently too many people on universal credit. What you rarely hear is that lots of people on universal credit are in work, and that's because work isn't paying. So what we're doing is subsidising employers and making it impossible to earn a living when food prices are going up, but wages are still stuck in 2008.
I disagree. I think we do hear it said many benefits are paid in work. I think that is part of the conversation. I think a useful starting point would be, I'm, say, in a Tory belt, working class, blue-walled seat. You come to my door and I say to you, Zack, are there too many people on welfare? What do you reply?
I think it's about making sure that work pays, because a lot of
No, but it's a doorstep. It's not me on Newsnight. I'm worried that I get up in the morning to pay for someone else to stay at home. Are there, Zack, I might vote Green, are there too many people on welfare?
It often surprises journalists, but I talk to real people the same way that I talk
Well, what's the answer?
on Newsnight. Well, the answer is no.
No, there are not. So should there be more?
We need to make sure that work pays so people don't need to use welfare. And a lot of that is because the government have brought in, for instance, national insurance rises, which is hitting employers, and then they're struggling to make sure that they're paying a proper living wage. All of these things are linked, and actually what we need to be doing is making sure we're taxing the super polluters, the corporations more, and at the same time supporting small and local businesses
do you agree
so they can employ local people.
Do you agree with the characterisation that it's Reform versus the Greens in the Gorton and Denton by-election, for instance?
Yes, it absolutely is.
OK, well, hold on. So we're on the same doorstep, and the Reform candidate comes, and I say, are there too many people on welfare? And they will say, yes. And you're going to say no. So there we have a clear line in British politics.
Well, my answer is more nuanced than no.
Well, theirs might be more nuanced, but they're going to say no.
Well, this is the thing, Reform are rarely nuanced, which is why it's easy for them to cut through. If you're on the left or in the Green Party, we need to address that I don't want anyone to be on welfare. I want to make sure that work pays, or if you're disabled, then you're getting the appropriate benefits that you need to survive and maybe even to thrive, because I think we shouldn't be going for the lowest common denominator.
I suppose what I'm really getting at is, you don't have to answer it all in the short time we've got, but where do you think the alignment is in our politics? I've heard you on Laura Kuenssberg say there is a new alignment going on in the world and here in Britain.
Yeah.
So do you think we're going into multi-party politics? Do you think the old two-party system is dead? What do you think?
I think the old two-party system has been dead for a long time, actually, and what we've seen, particularly on the day that we're recording this, where they're mired in scandal, is scandal after scandal, because ultimately there isn't a political project. No one's really saying anything or meaning anything. There's just people who are still clinging to power. And I think what that has done is created a deep mistrust in politics and the political system.
Do you mistrust politics? You're not an MP, but you want to be one. So you obviously trust the system because you want to join it.
I trust the system, but what I don't trust are some of the people in the system who have taken money from vested interests. I can sit here and say I've never taken a penny from private healthcare, oil and gas companies, arms trade companies or gambling companies.
Who have you taken money from?
Regular donations from members and no one else, actually.
OK, so just in terms of where I was a moment ago with my questioning, what's politics looking like? Is it fracturing? Is there young and old people voting in different ways? Do you get more support from younger people? When you're out, where do you feel the mo?
Well, polling shows regularly that between 18 and 49-year-olds, the Green Party come quite regularly in first place, including with YouGov. But every time I talk about that, I always get messages from older people who say, please don't discount us. I've been voting Green for ages, and actually I'm important too, and they absolutely are. So I think the answer to that is our voters come from a whole range of people. I think the key here is about uniting the 99%. To come back to your earlier questions, if you're unemployed or you're disabled, or you're running a small business, or even if you're running a medium-sized business, we all have so much more in common than multimillionaires and billionaires who politicians for far too long have allowed not to pay their fair share in tax. And what that has done has created austerity and this inequality gap.
Yeah, but we have an
actual
actual tax of about 60% for people just over 100,000. I mean, is 60% for someone on just over 100,000 too little?
You're talking about income, and I'm talking about wealth. And that's
okay.
a big division line here. We need to make work pay, because right now, far too often, we tax earned income more than we tax unproductive
would you lower
wealth.
tax for the £100,000 person?
It wouldn't be the first place I'd go, because I want to make sure that I'm protecting those who are on the lowest incomes. However, I do think there is a case to be made to look at income thresholds and make sure actually the tighter thresholds around inherited wealth and unproductive wealth, because what's happening there is we're getting the hoarding of assets, and that's bad for all of the 99%, because it means once those very few people have hoarded all the assets, they then buy our democracy, and they buy our power, and they buy our public services.
Okay. Now,
and that's why we've got to take them back.
One of the things that we're really dealing with here is an age-old fight between the left and the right, which is kind of, we tax less on the right, we tax more on the left. That's been the old system. And I just want to talk about the left just a little bit. So are you looking to be the sort of mojo left? Because I'm not necessarily saying that I know where the public is, but if you're going to get us to vote for you, surely you've got to be clearer about some of the foreign policy issues. So let's just take Israel and the United States.
Can I go first of all? I think the numbers speak for themselves. Since I became leader of the Green Party, when I sat on this sofa, 130,000 people have joined the party. We've tripled our poll ratings. And so I think what that's saying is lots of people are recognising the Green Party are the party of the left.
Okay.
And they like what they're hearing.
No, I mean, this is, for our purposes here on this channel, it's really interesting to hear you talk in these broad brush way. So let me just deal with an issue for the left. You said in a speech in 2018 that the Greens had become over-obsessed with Israel. Now, do you stand by that remark? Stop talking about Israel. Talk about microplastics and bills.
It's about making sure we're talking about all the other conflicts that are going on around the world. I think where Israel is different and particularly deserves attention right now is that our government for years now have been actively arming a genocide. And so I think that means any attention on the Israeli government is correct, because actually we need to be putting pressure on our government to stop the genocide.
And do you recognise Israel as a home for Jewish people? Do you think it has a right to exist?
Well, there's 5 Jewish people in British political history that have been in leadership positions. I'm one of them. And so I think Israel as a home for Jewish people has always been important.
But what's your answer to the question, does it have a right to exist?
Well, no state has a right to exist. States are not people. People have a right to exist, obviously, and the Israeli people and the Palestinian people both have rights to self-determination.
But does Britain have a right to? Does the UK have a right to exist?
Well, as I say, states don't have a right to exist, but British people have a right to have self-determination and sovereignty.
Do you recognise Israel as the post-war home for Jewish people with a right to defend itself as a state?
Yes.
So why do you think it's an issue to some of your councillors to slag off Israel?
I don't think it's about slagging off. I think it's about very legitimate criticism of a genocidal state that has not been implicit about what they intend to do. Quite often we've had Benjamin Netanyahu talking in genocidal terms about what he wants to do to the Palestinian people. I think it's important that this is a conversation about human rights, and I stand by any Green councillor that has spoken up for boycott, divestment and sanctions. We saw that work in South Africa, in apartheid South Africa. We've seen peace and diplomacy work in other nations around the world. And the idea that talking about Israel is in some way something that we have to be cautious about, I think is pretty insidious.
Well, I don't think you've been cautious. I'm just saying, where's the balance? Because this is not an interview with an Israeli government spokesman who will take issue with the genocide definition, which is normally ascribed not to the leader of the Green Party, but to international courts to define. But
international courts
yes,
and genocidal scholars who are very clear that it's a genocide.
Right, no, well, the official process has not been completed, would say the Israeli government. They do not recognise that. They're not here. You have said it. And I'm not contradicting you.
But we've also got Francesca Albanese, for instance.
But I want to ask you, the way you group Benjamin Netanyahu together, I'm a voter. I just want to know where my allies are. Who's more dangerous, Benjamin Netanyahu, Vladimir Putin, or Donald Trump?
They're all horrendous, and I don't think we should be comparing.
But the US is our long-time ally. This is the problem, you see. Why can't we choose?
I don't think the US is a long-time ally. I think the special relationship is truly and utterly broken. 86% of our arms imports come from the United States, the same man who is behaving, Donald Trump, in an increasingly unhinged and unpredictable way. Ukraine is our ally, yet Donald Trump says that he admires Vladimir Putin. He brings Zelensky, our actual ally, into the White House and then shames him for the world to see. I don't think this is the behaviour of someone who's a friend or an ally, and I think it'd be very easy to bury our head in the sand and pretend that the world's fine and everything can continue, or we can have honest, important conversations. I'm not sat here claiming I have, all the answers to geopolitics.
No, we're just trying to find out what makes you tick. But would you like a historic break in the special relationship, a break between the US and the UK? Is that what's in the Zack Polanski vision, a break?
Well, I think that break's happened already.
You think it's happened already? But we're in NATO with them, and they're part of the alliance that guarantees us. Would you say that we want to stay in NATO?
Do we have much guarantees when Donald Trump has threatened to annex Greenland? That would trigger...
But that's a question in answer to my question.
That would trigger Article 5, and Article 5 says an attack on one is an attack on all.
Should we stay in NATO?
Well, it's almost becoming a redundant question, because actually NATO is destroying itself from within.
Well, it's becoming a question you won't answer, Zack. Should we stay in NATO?
Well, right now, no one's talking about leaving NATO.
Including you.
Right. But what I am talking about, and it comes back to what I was just saying about not having all the answers, is we need to have a really urgent and important conversation about what does an alternative alliance look like. Now, the reason why we need to have that conversation is because Donald Trump has said that Article 5, an attack on one, an attack on all, no one would ever defend America, despite the fact, you'll know, the only time Article 5 has been triggered is when NATO countries moved in to defend the United States.
So would you boost up European defence? Is that a Zack Polanski vision? I'm not going to leave NATO, but I'm going to have a big, beefy European defence if the Greens have any say.
Well, lots of the European countries are now talking about a European security defence alliance, but actually I listened to General Richard Sheriff carefully, who said recently that we need to have a gap analysis. We need to look at exactly where the gaps are and make sure we're funding them in the appropriate way. I think the other important piece of information here is a report that the government tried to bury. This was a report last week between the heads of the MI5 and MI6, the joint intelligence chiefs, that said the biggest national security threat facing this country, to come back to the beginning, is the climate crisis and its cyber security. So we both need to defend this country through our own national security, but also make sure we're funding appropriately the imminent threats and the emerging threats too.
And do we tell the world that the Greens think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Well, I think, it's not just me that. The mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, said that Donald Trump was a fascist, and Donald Trump didn't seem to mind. I think what's important, though, is rather...
Do you mind? Do you mind calling him a fascist?
I think it's about his fascist policies, and I think when we've had ICE, the anti-immigration agency, shoot Rene Good in cold blood, in the light of day, when we see the changing of historical documents and the website, when we see the increasing authoritarian approaches, then I think it's important to say if it walks like a duck and sounds like a duck, it probably is a duck.
Right. I mean, the thing is, it's not a duck, is it? It's the country's post-war history we're talking about. And I'm just looking now at our youngest Newsnight viewer, who are told by Reform that the country's broken, who are told by you that it's time to junk the post-war world order with the Americans. You've explained that you think it's breaking anyway. But can I be optimistic as an 16-year-old voter?
Can I input one other thing, though?
Please.
I think this happened from Brexit as well. Brexit was one of the most catastrophic decisions this country's ever made. But it's very deliberate from Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump and Nigel Farage to put us in a place where we are subservient to the United States. We need to break that chain.
But as a 16-year-old voter, can I be optimistic about my future? Heaven forbid, I might live another 70 years. Is it going to be bright?
You can be very optimistic because the Green Party have tripled in the polls, and we want to lower your bills, protect the National Health Service, rebuild your public services, and tackle the climate crisis. So I would say join, get involved. We cannot be complacent about the future. It is going wrong, but let's rebuild the future together.
We're leaving you, unfortunately. Time is tight. But I just wonder, one thing I've always wondered about you is when you leave here, when you switch off, what is happening in Zack's life? Are you a cook? Are you a reader? Are you a writer? Are you a dreamer?
I'm a big reality TV watcher, which is the shameful answer, but the truthful answer. I find anything that can make you switch your brain off and just happen. So
Traitors?
Love Traitors, RuPaul's Drag Race, any of that stuff. I also like to have a dance, which has become less easy these days. But we did have a big Green Party fundraiser at Heaven nightclub last month, and it was great to get on the dance floor.
And did you have any early awakenings as a gay guy at Heaven?
Did I have any
early awakening? Did you go to Heaven when you were a young guy?
Oh, I used to work there.
And what were you up to?
Working there, doing the guest list out on the front. But in terms of what I did on the dance floor, that's definitely...
Did you turn people away?
I think, if people were overly drunk, then yes, but it was security's job.
You never said wrong shoes?
No, that's definitely not my vibe.
And so, what else? Are you a reader?
Yeah, I really, really do enjoy them, particularly enjoy fiction, although I have to say, since I was elected leader of the Green Party, it's more and more difficult to read fiction. I did just read a brilliant book, though, by Richard Powers called Bewilderment. which I'd recommend to anyone. It's almost hard to give any plot because it would be a spoiler.
And is there anyone in history on the right you openly admire?
Anyone in history on the right that I openly admire? I think the answer is no to that, to be honest.
Oh, come on.
Well, I just think if someone's on the right, then our values are in such different places, then why would I admire them?
Well, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. You can perhaps reserve the right to return and name a name.
Well, there we go. I'll have a long time to think about it.
Zack Polanski, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.